Hello, San Francisco. Woo! For the last 20 years, or over 20 years now, I've helped governments, communities, and companies across the world plan for, respond to, and recover from disasters, many of which you've probably all seen at some point coverage of on the news. I have had the great fortune of being in this position and meeting hundreds of helpers and heroes and seeing what really goes on behind the scenes and all of the positive things that come from negative things when we experience disasters. I'm going to share with you a few stories of people that I've had the fortune to meet who've helped communities rebuild and recover after disasters. First, I want to talk to you about how anybody in this room could be one of these heroes that I'm going to talk to you about today. How to be a hero? I think it's pretty simple based on who I've met and worked with and interviewed. One, look for the helpers, and I'll help you figure out how to do that. Be a helper, but to be a helper, and we've heard this throughout the last day and a half so far, to be a helper, you need to be able to be in a position to help yourself. And I'll give you some tips on being able to do that as well. First of all, I want you to look at this image. Can anybody share with me what they think this image is from, or you recognize this image from? 9/11. That's right. And when you look at this image, what do you see first? Right. We see smoke billowing out. We think of death and devastation and destruction. But let's think about what Mr. Rogers said once when he was being interviewed, when he was a little boy, and he would be scared and he would see bad things in the news. His mother would tell him and remind him to look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. I want you to take a look at that image now. Again, what else do you see? Helpers and heroes everywhere. And if you can take something back with you at the end of today to be able to consider yourself and to encourage your children and your family members and others to think about is the next time you see a devastating image of a disaster, look for those helpers and heroes, and they're everywhere. When I started looking for them and finding them to feature them in a book that I published a couple of years ago called Disaster Heroes, it was remarkable to see how many of them were out there. And since then, I've had the good fortune of meeting others since I've put out the book as well. I want to explain why I was encouraged and inspired to write this book. I started out as a journalist from my first career, and I thought that I was going to be a journalist for the rest of my life. But then, in a very indirect way, I became an emergency management professional. And I would get sent to disasters, and every time I'd go in the background, I would see all of these helpers and heroes helping. But then I thought, why aren't we seeing this on the news? And I thought, well, if the news isn't going to cover these behind-the-scenes great stories that come from disasters, then I'm going to do it. So I started looking at all of the different major disasters from 9/11 onwards to find those everyday heroes that did something to help recover and rebuild communities. I'm not going to share with you those stories, but I'm going to share with you some more recent people that I've had the fortune to meet because of the work that I do. And what I've discovered is that helpers and heroes really do shine brightest in darkness. I'm also going to share with you how you have to be your own hero before you can be a hero to somebody else. I want to talk to you about Luis Nájera, who is a former journalist from Mexico, one of the most dangerous areas in Mexico. And it was in a border town that was known for its drug cartels and hundreds of missing and murdered women while he was reporting. His job at the time was to cover and actually be a trained bystander, is what he calls it. As a reporter, he was trained to photograph images of death, devastation, and destruction, and not help, but document. But I want to tell you about how Luis reached out to me. Luis reached out to me a few months ago because he's been living in exile in Canada since 2008. He made a decision to be a hero to himself and his family after seeing many of his colleagues being killed, murdered, for the coverage that they were covering in his country at the time, and he made the decision to leave for the safety of his family after getting repeated death threats.
So he's been living in exile in Canada ever since. He reached out to me a few months ago because he wanted to give back to the country that took him in to get into the field of emergency management, and he wanted some tips from me. But when we met just a few weeks ago, he shared with me another story that I thought I needed to share with you, and that's what I'm going to share with you right now. This is Luis, and he spent his career covering death and devastation in his country. But last year, he was in Toronto, Canada, where he lives now and where we met to talk, and he was telling me about the minute that he changed from a trained bystander to a hero. He was on the subway system. How many of you have been to Toronto, Canada? And there's a subway system there. A lot of people use the subway. He was at the subway with his wife, and all of a sudden they witnessed a young man who was intoxicated who jumped onto the rails of the subway and was trying to cross to get to the other side. Very dangerous. All of a sudden he saw that a train was oncoming. His first reaction as a trained bystander was to pull out his cell phone and try to snap a picture. But then all of a sudden, just with a soft voice and a push and nudge from his wife, she said, "What are you doing? Help that man." Instantly, he realized that he had an opportunity to change from a bystander to a hero. He jumped onto the subway rails, pulled that young gentleman off, and that was the instant he realized he could be not a bystander anymore, but a hero. Luis wanted me to share with you some tips on how he says we can all be a hero. Forget the red cape. Real life heroes, he says, are humble, simple people who put their own well-being above everyone else's, above their own, fall hard and recover faster. Luis says because of what he went through and some challenges that he went through, he thinks that it enabled him and helped him to be able to think and be heroic to others. Avoid hashtag I am hero and what I call hashtags versus heroism. And we've been hearing about it a lot over the last day and a half. When the time comes, if you witness something, think about that moment where you have an opportunity to put your cell phone down and be a hero. And imagine how much better that's going to make you feel if you've saved a life, as opposed to how it's going to make you feel if you've posted something and how many likes you've gotten because of it. I now want to share with you a story about another man that I've had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with over the last couple of years. He's a tornado survivor. But I want to tell you about how just one person, and we've heard a lot of these stories already, how one person can make a difference and help a whole community and other communities around the world now recover after disasters. This is Matt Dighton from Kansas and his dog Molly. They were survivors from a tornado that ripped through his community in 2007 and destroyed 90% of the town. But instead of being a victim, Matt and Molly decided to be heroes. They quickly discovered that the children in the community were having problems communicating and sharing their feelings after losing their homes and going back to that area of destruction. But he realized that Molly had a connection with these children, and somehow he was getting them to talk through Molly. What he did was then realize that Molly could be a service dog and help children open up. He started traveling to other disaster areas with Molly and working with the children to help them recover. So he, instead of being a victim of a disaster, he ended up being a hero to not only his community, but several others since. And now Matt travels the world to be able, Molly's not around anymore, but Matt still travels the world to deliver hope and healing. Some tips from myself as an emergency management professional and Matt as a disaster survivor. Have a home safety plan and practice it. How many of you have a home safety plan? Perfect. The rest of you, please, I encourage you to have one. Emergency kits, have some at your home, office, and vehicle. Make sure that you're prepared for an emergency. Stock water and supplies. Plan to be self-sufficient for up to 3 days in case people can't get to you. Be your own hero so that you can then be a hero to your family and others afterwards. Have a go bag packed and ready to go. Whatever essentials you think, if you needed to evacuate in a minute, have things ready ahead of time so that you could just go within 30 minutes or less. And register with local emergency notification systems so that you can be aware in case something is coming your way. I want to now share with you how kids can be heroes too, and I've been witnessing that quite a bit lately. I want to share with you a story about Ellie and Connor and how they were recently recognized in San Bernardino for being heroes and providing help to tragedy victims across the world. Ellie her mother is a survivor of the San Bernardino terror attack. And Connor lost his father in that terror attack. But how they are healing and helping others heal is through art therapy and painting stars of hope to be able to provide hope and healing to others. And I had a star with me that I will demonstrate. Thank you very much. Thank you. And here's one of those stars. Now we've got children and adults from across the world that paint these stars, and we deliver them across the world. I want to show you the connections that just a simple star, a piece of wood painted by a survivor, being sent with a message of love and hope to other survivors, are helping connect survivors, and they're being heroes to other survivors across the world. This is in San Bernardino, a year after that shooting happened. We've got survivors from San Bernardino, from the 9/11 terror attacks, from other disasters. There's Matt Dighton from Kansas in the back. Heroes coming together, survivors who you would think that normally wouldn't be heroes, but they are helping each other heal. I want to also share with you, I have brought stars that were sent to me by Connecticut, San Bernardino, as well as New York City, to be able to bring some hope and healing to this area after the recent YouTube headquarters active shooter attack. This is one of those stars. I'll read you the message. It was painted by a survivor, a student from North Park Elementary School, which some of you might recall had an active shooter attack exactly a year ago last month. A lot of people didn't hear about it because there have been so many active shooter attacks since. But this one was painted by a student from that school and sent here to be able to help provide hope and healing to your community. And it was painted by Angeline from North Park Elementary School in San Bernardino, California. She says, "Happiness is like jam. You can't spread it without getting some on yourself." And on that note, in summary, I encourage you, every time you see a disastrous image, look for the helpers. Think about how you can be a helper, but the best way that you can do that is to help yourself. Thank you.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.